a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday. It is the Circa Million Show, Week 18 here to Sharky Waters Nation, 9 Words Lifestyle Ride, the way we got of the water. It is the gun. It is the shark. It is a conversation to be had. One of the most interesting weeks of the entire season, the final week of the season, the campaign that was and came and now is here in January of 2023. Anthony Latino's in a car driving. It's just the two dogs in the house. Welcome to the show, people. Get the energy building. It is a suddenly not so casual, beautiful Sunday morning. Guns Picks, what's going on this morning, my brother?
It's week 18, folks. There's playoff implications in a lot of these games. This is one of the toughest weeks to cap in sports. So all I say is be very careful with this week because it's very hard to see what teams are going to be motivated, which teams are not. And plus we have a full slate of playoffs. So save your bank account. We have a few plays for you here, but man, what a tough card. It's going to be exciting week 18. It's sad that it's ending, but hey, we got playoffs to go. I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, one of the most fascinating and hard to figure out dynamics on this week is purely who's going to care. And of course, the standout point to capping this is there are certain teams that are playing for seeding and others that are fighting for the back end of the wild card race, but not a lot of teams. So the entire rest of the league is just in this gigantic pool of unknown. And speaking of pool of unknown, we're going to Guns' first pick. And we're going to the NFC South in Atlanta, in the Dome, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Tom Brady and the boys come in here with some speculation they might play. I don't think they're going to play based on this line. Guns Picks, talk to me on this, the first official of the broadcast.
Now, if you were watching last week, you saw the Panthers lose the NFC South to the Tampa Bay Bucks. It's a complete deflation of their motivation here, and they're going to be playing a Saints team that's red hot. So let's get into the numbers here.
Guns,
so like I said,
Guns.
What?
Wrong game. We're talking about the Falcons.
Oh, you know what? I got ahead of myself. Sorry about that. Let's go to the Falcons here. Different note. We'll get to the other game with the New Orleans Saints in a second, but we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons here. It's weird that this line is sitting here at -4. But you have to know where the Bucks are. I was just talking about Carolina's deflation. The reason for the deflation is because the Bucks clinched the NFC South. So really, they have nothing to play for here. They've already locked in the 5th seed. They're going to the playoffs. So I think they're going to be resting some starters here, and that the line implication here is telling you that. But let's talk about Atlanta. They're coming off losing 4 out of the last 5 games, but they came off a nice win over the Arizona Cardinals, 20-19. Tampa off that big win last week's already locked in the number 5 seed. And then you have Atlanta playing really good at home this season. If you actually look at their splits, they have a +2 point differential, -35 net yard average at home this season. And then you look at Tampa, they've just had really bad struggles when they actually go on the road away from Tampa. -3 point differential, +2 net yard average on the road this season. Now, Tampa did win the first matchup against Atlanta 20-15. So there's a little bit of a revenge factor associated with this game. And actually, if you actually look at the matchups between these two teams, the home team is 8-3 against the spread in this matchup. So like I said, Tampa really has nothing to play for. They can rest their starters. They can actually put in the fans if they want to and suit them up so they can rest their starters for next week. So I think the line is telling you the story here. I'm going to be taking Atlanta. I think they're going to want to finish the season strong. Give me Atlanta, -4, 2-unit special.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on my radar, I have one official, which I will be dropping shortly. But I think this is really a top lean and a top look here. As Guns mentioned, let the line tell you a story. And when you look at this matchup and you see Atlanta laying 4 points and also getting steamed to 4.5 in certain books, let the sports books tell you the story. The narrative of this game is integrated into the line, and that is that the Bucks are not going to play their starters. And I've heard all sorts of speculation this week. Todd Bowles, Tom Brady quotes coming out saying they're going to play. I don't believe you guys. And I think maybe a series or two, kind of like the preseason, just to get your feet wet a little bit, a little burn, a little sweat, something like that. I think this is going to be the 3rd string quarterback for most of the game. And of course, you do get Desmond Ridder coming in here, obviously only very, very brief NFL career with Atlanta. You do get this revenge element and this line dynamic, which is very, very strong. The game that was played in Tampa Bay, Atlanta actually did cover that game. They were down big in the game, I believe 21-0. And this was early season when Marcus Mariota and the boys were running an incredibly clean sheet. They started the season, I believe, 5 or 6-0 ATS. And they were the backdoor artists on the road. And that's what they did that week. They backdoored it and did cover a 10.5, 21-15. So now you come back here, 10.5 on the road, all the way over to -4. So 14.5 point gap for a team that is out of the playoffs with a very young quarterback versus obviously the best quarterback in the history of the NFL going to the playoffs. Playoffs are clinched. There's no motivation here whatsoever. Again, I'm not on this officially. I'm not going nuts on this card. However, if you guys are really trying to play this, the gun's on it for 2 units. I completely back this play. I think Atlanta is the absolute sharp look in this play at -4. Next one, we're going to go down the list here, obviously a full card at all divisional games, which I think is fascinating stuff. When you get every single game on the card, a divisional game, you get a lot of data. You get second matchups, you get revenge matchups, and you get the best environment for information you get in NFL season. Let's start, and we'll just go down the list. Houston at Indianapolis. Indianapolis Colts laying 2.5 points. The prior environment this year found a tie, 20-20, I believe. And I think this is just a tough game to cap. However, I lean towards Houston here. I think Indianapolis is in complete, utter shambles. They're moving back to Sam Ehlinger in this game. Davis Mills has been fairly impressive in recent history. The line is short. Indianapolis did lay 6.5 points earlier this year. They come home and they're laying a small 2.5, 3. Houston showing upward movement. I think Lovie Smith has a much better motivational grip over his group than Jeff Saturday does. Unofficially here, again, leaning towards Houston. Guns, picks, comments.
Hey, you never know. They may be calling Jim Harbaugh right now, trying to get him over to the Colts. We'll see how that everything works out for Michigan and the allegations that are going on with that team. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Texans are the side here. Texans really, you could say like, oh yeah, they're going to tank for the first pick in the playoff, the NFL draft. They've already locked in the spot. Okay, so there's no win lose. One team moves up a notch in the NFL draft. They've already locked in the spot. So I think this is going to be more of a Lovie Smith motivational type of let's get this win to finish the season off strong and carry it over into next season. And then you have the Colts that are just kind of mismanaged right now. Jeff Saturday kind of thrown into the role, going from the commentary with ESPN and then getting thrown into this mix. It just doesn't work. I think his decision making has been really, really poor. And you've just seen it week to week for the Colts. They're just kind of just limping, trying to get to the end of the season. I think the Texans are going to be the spot on this one. So yeah, completely agree. I think the Texans are the lean that I would take on this one.
Yeah, and just final point on this, as you mentioned, Jeff Saturday obviously coming out of the ESPN studio onto the sideline, just unprofessional hire, and it is Jim Irsay just sticking in his guy. That's it. There was no prep, there was nothing outside of a win at Vegas in the opener. For whatever reason that was, Vegas just being also very inconsistent and unprofessional themselves. This team has been a disaster. This team blew a 33-point lead, the biggest lead in the history of the sport. They also got outscored by Dallas on the road, 33-0. Somehow, coincidentally, the same number there in the fourth quarter to get blown out. Motivation in this game is definitely Houston, and general, I would say, flow within the franchise comically is on the Houston Texans, who have the worst record in the sport. Go figure there. Anyway, next one. We're going to be quick on this one. Minnesota at Chicago. Not much to play for here. Chicago's starting the elusive Nate Peterman at quarterback. Guns, picks. Minnesota laying 6 points on the road. This is a Minnesota line. Peterman historically awful. Comments on this one.
Yeah, I'm never going to ever back Nate Peterman in any situation. The fact that he still has a job in the NFL is just shocking to me. When I saw that he was going to be the starter this week, I laughed to myself because all I could see was I could see his stats in my mind, like 50% completion rate, 100 yards passing, and 4 INTs, 0 touchdowns. That's kind of what I thought the numbers were on this one. I think the line's right on this one. I think it's super sharp. I know the Vikings really don't have much to play for in this one as well. It's just kind of a limp into the playoff type of situation. I think there's going to be spots in the playoffs, however, that might be worth looking into, especially if the Vikings are going to be overvalued. So I would say that this is probably a Vikings lean, but I'm not going to be putting any money on this one. I think there's just too many outliers as far as personnel is concerned for the Bears. Did we lose the shark? I think we did. Well, let's go into some of these other games that we got going on right now. I have a pick for you on this game that has got playoff implications and motivational factor here as well. Let's talk about the Patriots versus the Bills. I think on both sides, you have two different situations here. So you have the Patriots playing for their playoff lives, controlling their own destiny in this spot. The line is really get at +8, which is a little bit high on this one, but I think it's more predicated on the fact that the Bills have a motivational factor in itself with Damar Hamlin. The injury there looks like he's coming out of it. He's pulling through, which is great. It's good to hear. You don't want to see anybody lose their lives playing this wonderful game. So, but there is a play for Damar Hamlin mentality going into this game. But also looking just from the playoff scenario standpoint, the Bills really have nothing to play for anyways. I mean, they're in the playoffs. They pretty much locked in the 2 seed. There may be a little bit of switching there between the Bengals and the Bills, but right now they own the 2 seed. So you got to look at when you look at New England, they're coming off that big divisional win last week that really parachuted them into this spot here, 23-21, despite having a -84 net yard average in that game. Now you have Buffalo, huge motivational spot coming off that Monday night thing, like I said, but they've won 6 straight and pretty much have clinched the number 2 seed. Now you got New England. They're seeking the revenge on this one as well. If you remember on a Thursday night, they played in Foxborough and lost 24-10. Kind of an ugly game overall. They had -113 net yard average for that game. But you got to look at a couple of spots here, and the Shark is back now. I'm talking about the Patriots and Bills right now, so just to catch you up there, Shark. So when you look at New England seeking revenge on this one, like I said, 24-10 lost on Thursday night. And if you actually look at these matchups, it seems like the road team always covers in these spots. If you actually look at the last 29 games versus the Bills and the Patriots, 27-2 against the spread, the road team is. So everything kind of aligns to what New England is. I know the line is a little egregiously high, but I think most of that is predicated on the fact that the Devlin Hamlin injury was so emotional. The players didn't want to play the game. And now they're going to be basically, there is that scenario where they're going to be playing up to for their guy Hamlin. And it's going to be a really highly motivated game overall. But I know Bill Belichick in New England are going to want to come out here, get the win. And I think if they do, they're going to have to play each other next week in Buffalo once again. So they can just stay right in Buffalo. I'm going to be taking New England on this one. I'm just taking the +8. It's a 1-unit play for me, because there's a lot of boxes that couldn't be checked on this one, but I like New England. So I'm wearing the jersey, I'm wearing the Edelman. Give me New England, +8, 1-unit special.
Yeah, apologies, guys. I don't know what happened there. The internet at this house went out to the chagrin of myself. Obviously not ideal in terms of the flow of the show. We appreciate you guys staying with us here. Obviously, Guns Picks making a lot of comments. I was talking about it just before. There's only a certain amount of teams that have motivation to play this week, and it is obviously playoff-centric, mostly at the back end of was very I think it could I cut out again.
Your Shark. Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit. Yeah. Now you're back. You're back. I froze again. Okay. I think he's freezing here. Sorry, guys. He's out again. This is a rough show, but hey, it's week 18. What do you expect on these ones? Let's go into the next game here. Moving along across the board. Ravens Bengals. I don't really have a play on this one. I know the Bengals will be probably full staffed. Like I said, somebody mentioned in the chat that the Bills probably have to play for the 2 seed here. Yes, you're correct. I did mention that a little bit, but really, it all depends on who you want to play. on this one. So I don't think there's a lot of motivational for the Bills to get in the spot. However, I think the Bengals will want to kind of move up here. Looks like everybody's going to be playing in this game. And then you look at the Ravens side of the ball, really nothing to play for in this one. I think basically there is some playoff implications if the Ravens lose. If and the Bengals win, I think there's some movement in there as far as playoff seeding is concerned. So it seems like with the line set here, I think it's at -7 or so. I think the Bengals are going to be the spot for my lean. The Ravens really not playing. I think they're playing Anthony Brown as the quarterback here. And if Lamar Jackson is not in that lineup and he's not taking the snaps and he's not running that offense, I don't really trust the Ravens offense at all. Their defense is actually playing really good right now. And there may be, as I'm talking myself into this game, I may be having a lean to the under on this one as well. I know the Cincinnati Bengals unders have been hitting at a decent clip for the most part. They just play. It seems like the competition that they play in these games seems to be more predicated on a slower pace. And really, the Ravens, I just don't trust them to score any points. So if I had a lean on this one, I'm probably be going with the under in this one, and probably a lean towards the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, moving on down the board. I'm going to go and give you my next play here, and it's going down in the Bayou. And we're talking about the Panthers and the Saints. Now, both these teams, really nothing to play for, obviously. None of these teams are going to be making the playoffs. But I think it's more of a standpoint for the Panthers. Now, the Panthers last week, as I spoke before, before I misinterpreted what game we were talking about, the Carolina Panthers came off one of the toughest losses to clinch the NFC South to the Buccaneers, losing 30-24, minus 78 net yards for that game. But when you actually look at the Saints are really finished in the season at a nice clip. They're on a 3-game winning streak, coming off a real nice win versus Philly on the road, 20-10. Granted, Philly playing Gardner Minshew, Jalen Hurts was out for that game. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, but still, I think the Saints are really cooking right now. Also, you got to look at the Saints at home. Saints plus 2-point differential, plus 38 net yard average this season. When you look at Carolina on the road, they are just a different team. They have a -7-point differential on the road, minus 64 net yard average. Night and day compared to when they play at home here. Also, when you look at the first matchup, New Orleans did lose that one to Carolina, 22-14, despite having a plus 133 net yard average for that game. So they actually dominated the yardage battle versus Carolina, but most of the loss is predicated on the turnovers. They had a -3 turnover ratio for that game versus Carolina. So if they can control the turnover, I think the yardage will just come for these New Orleans Saints. Plus, you got to look at the line correlation on this one, too. The first time that these two met, Carolina was at home. They were a 1-point dog at home. Now they're going on the road, and they're sitting as 3.5-point dogs. So a little bit of a switch there. Most of that predicated on the fact that, home versus away. But still, Carolina won the first game. So you think if it was a Carolina type of spot, the line would either stay the same or it would move towards the favorite. Also, you got to look at New Orleans in this spot. 6-2 straight up versus Carolina in the last 8 meetings. Home team has won the last 4 matchups and covered. And also New Orleans is 11-6 against the spread versus Carolina in the last 17 matchups. So with all that being said, I think this is a perfect spot to take the New Orleans Saints, especially with a deflated Carolina Panthers team coming off that loss. I think there's going to be a little bit of a hangover there for Carolina. So I'm going to be taking New Orleans minus 3.5, and that is a 2-unit play for me. All right, moving down the board. Let's look at the Jets and the Dolphins here. Now, we know last week the Jets lost their playoff hopes, completely crushed, having a great start to the season and then finishing absolutely flat here. The Dolphins had a perfect spot to go play the New England Patriots. Couldn't pull out the win, lost by 2 points, and now they're sitting in a spot where they're still in playoff hopes, but they need some movement here from the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots to lose. So there is hopes, but those are very dire hopes here, folks. And then you got you got to look at the situation with the quarterbacks here. So the Jets are going to be starting Joe Flacco, coming off the bench. They White's not playing. Wilson, they won't play him ever again. It doesn't look like Salah even wants him on the roster anymore. And then you have on the Dolphins side, they're going to be starting Skylar Thompson. And I think this is just a Dolphins team that is just trying to get to the end of the season. I don't think this is a team that really wants to be in the playoffs, or especially with not having Tua. His concussions are absolutely insane right now, and I'm not even sure he's going to be 100% for the rest of his career with as many concussions that he's had. Just absolutely brutal on that standpoint. But Skylar Thompson's going to be starting. You have Flacco on the other side. I think Flacco is just a seasoned vet. He's been here before. I wouldn't trust Thompson here, and I think this is probably a more of a motivational spot for the Jets. Because whether you like it or not, when you play in these divisional games versus a team that's not in the playoffs versus a team that that has a chance to get in the playoffs, that other team is going to want to knock you out. They don't want you in the playoffs. They don't want you representing the AFC East. They're going to treat this as a playoff game, in my opinion. So, I mean, if I had to lean on this one, I'm probably going to take the Jets. I am pretty much almost there to lock that in. It may be a play that I add after the show. But if there's a lean on this one, I would be taking the New York Jets here, folks. I wouldn't be taking the Dolphins right now. I think this is just a team that's just trying to get to the end of the season, and they just want to get rested and look forward to next season. That's my opinion. Another interesting spot here, and then another game that I may be able to get to the number here. You have the Steelers playing at home. They are favored here, I think 2.5, 3 points, versus the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns right now, nothing to play for here, folks. I mean, unless they want to go and knock out their divisional opponent here in the Steelers. There's also a revenge factor here for the Steelers. They did lose the first matchup, I believe. So you have that implication in there as well. Steelers got, they're playing for their playoff lives here. I think they need New England to lose. And I don't know if they need Miami to lose or not, but I think they don't. So if New England loses and the Steelers win, I think they do get into the playoffs. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat. But this is more of a motivational spot, I think, to take the Steelers. Now, I know they've had some weather issues over there in Pittsburgh. I know they've rain and wind and stuff like that, but that was the night before. So if anything they're going to have to deal with today is probably more of a wet field. So I also lean the over on this spot because I think a lot of people are predicating on the fact that the weather hit Pittsburgh. These two teams are more defensive oriented, not scoring a lot of points. But I think the number is going to be low enough for me to take the over. So if there's a total that I really like today, it's probably the over in this game. I think Pickett's really coming into his own. Played a great game last week, drove him down the field last second against the Ravens, and got that touchdown that they needed to keep their playoff hopes alive. I think this kid is coming into his own. He's really maturing as he gets towards the season. And quite frankly, I'm not going to step in the way of Mike Tomlin. This may be his first losing season ever as a coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I don't think that's going to happen under him. I think he's a great, highly motivating coach, and I think this is going to be a team that's going to be ready to go and ready to steamroll the Cleveland Browns here. So if I have a lean on this one, I may get there with a unit play on this one. I like the Steelers here. I think they get it done. Going to the chat here. Looks like throw Browns in a teaser here, Chewbacca. Now it's not. I don't think it's a Browns day here, buddy. Just saying what's up to Akbar. How you doing, buddy? Hate that -16. If you're talking about the Eagles game, we'll get to that in a second here. All right, let's go down. Looking at the 4:00 slate games here. Here's a pick that I'm going to have on this one. You got the Chargers versus the Broncos here. Now, the Chargers pretty much have already kind of locked in their playoff spot here. They came into this game with a 4-game win streak. They're coming off a nice win, 31-10 over the LA Rams. The Shark is now back in the tank. Want to get him back in here. We can I was circling through the 1 p.m. games, just one after the
Okay.
other. So if there's a game that you specifically want to talk about, I know you have do you have a take on the Browns and the Steelers game?
Yeah, I do. And again, apologies, guys. I'm in Florida. The internet went down for the entire block for like 10 minutes, everything, but all phones, all internet. So apologies, guys. It's not the world we need sometimes. But staying course here. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee and refocus my mind. Cheers to you guys. We're having coffee. If anybody's having any morning beverages or water, whatever you're doing, best of energy. And yeah, so Guns. My only official play this week is Pittsburgh -2.5, -3 as well. Some books still have 2.5. And again, we were talking about this before, but when you look at this card, you have to look at motivation. The only teams in the AFC that have motivation to get into the playoffs that are not in at this point are New England, Miami, and Pittsburgh. Going through those matchups, Pittsburgh is the only one of the three where you have a revenge game and a line number showing significant strength to the team you want to buy. And when you look at what happened earlier this year between Pittsburgh and Cleveland, it was Mitchell Trubisky on the road against, I believe it was Jacoby Brissett. I think it was a primetime game. I forget if it was Thursday night or Monday night, but Cleveland did get them 29-17. Cleveland scored a late garbage touchdown. I think it was a runaround fumble play at the end of the game to get to 29. It was 22-17 before that, a really tight cover on a -3.5, a game that was really, really tight on the number. Now you come back across. This is Kenny Pickett football. This is not Mitchell Trubisky football. And this is a guy that is showing why he is projected to potentially be really legendary quality. If you go back to the past couple of weeks, some of these late throws this kid's been making against the grain, on the run, small windows. Go back to last week, Najee Harris, corner of the end zone. Really, really refined stuff at the quarterback position. And you go to Cleveland. Cleveland really is in shambles. Deshaun Watson has come back and really been a shell of his former self. I thought he'd be better. I thought there was a lot of abstract elements, of course. The whole scandal that he's involved in is hard to figure out within itself. But you take that much time off, you come back. Cleveland is very, very disrupted. And as I mentioned, Cleveland was -3.5 in that game. You come back across. This is a 6.5 gap. This is very strong for Pittsburgh. And it's the only one of the three matchups where you can't make a really legitimate counter argument for the opponent. As I was mentioning before when I got cut out, you could make a counter argument for the Bills being highly inspired to get seeding and to play for DeMar Hamlin. And the Miami game, there is a lot of counter narrative to take the Jets. Jets playing spoiler, being good on the road. Joe Flacco being particularly good on the road early season. And Miami with Skylar Thompson being a third string quarterback. So of all the three, New England, Miami, and Pittsburgh is the only one for me that doesn't have a contaminating factor or a counter narrative. My only official play on this card, I am on Pittsburgh at -2.5, and I wouldn't talk you guys off 3. Guns, you guys were going down the board. Did you discuss the Jets game in detail?
Yeah, I did. I went through that one. About the same stuff that you talked about with Skylar Thompson and Joey Flacco. I just gave him a lean on the Jets.
Okay, so you want to go to 4 o'clock then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay, great. 4 o'clock slate. First one, we're going to talk about this game as this game obviously plays a major part in the NFC playoff picture at the back end. 3 teams have access: Seattle, Green Bay, and Detroit. Seattle plays first at 4 o'clock in the Pacific Northwest divisional rivalry against the Rams. Rams come in here with a lot of stuff going on. However, Guns picks, give me some conversation on this, and I'll jump off it.
It goes back to the fact that, like, you always say, like, oh yeah, Seattle is super motivated for this one. The Rams have nothing to play for. I was like, well, I beg to differ on this one. I think when you're playing in a divisional game and you're going against a team that has a chance to make the playoffs, you coach up that team to motivate your players to be like, hey, let's make sure that this team does not make the playoffs. And we'll treat this as our own personal playoff game. And I think this is what the Rams are going to be doing in this spot here. I think the Rams came off a loss to the LA Chargers, didn't really play their best ball last week. They're going to want to finish the season strong here. I just don't really trust the Seahawks to win this game. So I think that if there's any take on this one or any lean, it's nothing I'm going to be taking personally or official. But I think the Rams are probably the spot here. And also, this is going to really affect, and I want to tell people that are going to be betting the Sunday night football game, I would say if you're going to be taking the Detroit Lions, or you're leaning on the Detroit Lions, you should probably take that number now. I think this is probably one of those spots that Detroit definitely needs Seattle to lose. That is part of how they're going to make the playoffs. If Seattle loses and Detroit wins, Detroit gets a playoff spot. Green Bay controls their own destiny. So, so believe me, the Lions are going to be watching this game hard, and Campbell is going to be coaching his guys up hard if Seattle does lose this game. But I think the motivation will drop dramatically if Seattle does win this game, because it does knock out the Detroit Lions. So if there's a lean on this one, I'm probably playing. I want to see a good competitive Sunday night football game, so I'm going to be leaning on the Rams here.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, there was a lot of conversation within the media this week about the NFL not managing this schedule particularly well. Obviously, where one game gets sort of relegated back and dependent on the first one and they're not played at the same time, it's a little bit difficult. And it's honestly not managed particularly well. But I do think there is access on the Rams here. I think people might say, wow, you guys are insane. You're taking the Rams. The narrative has come out pretty emphatically yesterday that Sean McVay might be out after the season. And I was listening to it, obviously 5-11 on the campaign. This has been the first season in his career as a head coach where they've been under 500. And, you say to yourself, is he copping out? Is he just running away? He wins a Super Bowl, comes back, the team's trash. He's out. Like, that's it. And, people were speculating that I think he's feeling too much stress. And I think, it's a great point. I mean, when you set the standard super high like that off a Super Bowl and you're losing week after week and you got the microscope on you, I certainly feel it. I mean, he's only 36 years old. He just got married. He probably wants to go live his life a little bit. This kid's been in the NFL ever since John Gruden hired him at a low-level staff position with the Bucs going back a period of time. So I understand it completely, but I don't think that entirely contaminates the point to take the Rams, because I think the key point here is Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield really is the guy who will show up with energy regardless of the situation. Baker Mayfield could be playing for some sort of JV team on another planet, and he'd still bring the energy. It's just how he functions as a person. Of course, this is how he got through college football, and it's how he got the Heisman Trophy. It's how he got drafted number 1 overall. I mean, obviously, he is fool's gold to a certain degree. He probably should not have been drafted number 1 overall. John Dorsey fell in love with him for whatever reason, but it was his charisma, and the charisma is there. And I do think ultimately the shortness of this line is telling you a tighter game than not. Seattle laid 7.5 points on the road. They did not cover a 7.5, 27-23. Now you're 6 at home. This theoretically should come up off a 7.5 road to at least 9.5 at home. It's not. Seattle theoretically has the motivation. The line's shortening up. It's telling you a Rams story. I think Seattle honestly was just too hot early season. This screams tight, low-scoring divisional football. My top lean in this game would be the Rams at +6. Next one, Guns picks. Denver Broncos come in here. Final game of really a surprising campaign. I don't think anybody in the world predicted them to be this pedestrian and this useless. I think it's gone wrong since the opening kickoff of the season against Seattle, maybe not coincidentally, in a primetime game going back to September. But Nathaniel Hackett's gone. John Driscoll, I believe, is in, the old special teams coordinator for the Ravens. A lot of moving parts. However, this is a spot similar to the Falcons where you're finding a team in the Chargers that is already in the playoffs with nothing to play for. Denver's playing for pride. This coach will have them ready to go. And I think this is one last stand. And the line is telling you that story. Guns picks. Tell us the story, an official play.
I mean, there's a reason why Denver is favored here, -3 versus the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers have already kind of locked up their playoff spot. I know there's a little bit of movement here and there, depending on how. I guess it's more predicated on the fact of the outcome of the Bengals game. If the Ravens lose, there may be some seeding adjustment there. We'll see how that all pans out. Just want to call a couple guys in the chat, though. I think Lockbets is hoping that Baker Mayfield is the next quarterback for the Jets if he does shine, or he may be going to the XFL. Hey, we're going to be betting some XFL here pretty soon. But let's talk about the Chargers here for a second. Playing great ball. They're on a 4-game win streak. They're coming off that big win versus the LA Rams, 31-10. In the last 4 games, they have a plus 12 point differential, plus 147 net yard average. That's what you want to see at the end of the season going into the playoffs. Denver has lost 7 out of their last 8 games. They're off a close loss last week versus the Kansas City Chiefs on the road, 27-24. Actually had, the lead bounce back and forth. I think Denver's offense actually stepped up and played really well last week under the new interim coach Rosberg. Now, Denver is trying to finish off the season strong. They fired their head coach, which was well overdue. That guy didn't belong in the position that he was in. The interim coach has really stepped up. I think he's got these players motivated to play for him. And then, like I said, the LA Chargers really have nothing to play for in this one. They've already locked in the playoff spot. Seeding is the only thing that's really going to matter in this one, and I just don't think that they're going to risk any of their starters. You may have one of those type of preseason type of play where the starters go in there for the first, maybe the first quarter, first half, and then they're starting to put in a lot of the extras just to get through the game. Now, Denver did lose the first matchup versus the Chargers, 19-16. So there is a revenge element in there for Denver. Also, you got to look at this matchup every time these two teams meet. Home team is 6-1 against the spread in this matchup, and Denver is actually 6-2 against the spread versus the Chargers overall in the last 8. So, unmotivated team already made the playoffs versus a team that just wants to finish the season strong. I think Denver's going to come in here. They still have a great defense. Last time I checked, and I think Russell Wilson, seeing what he did last week, I'm hoping that this is more of a bouncing on point and getting some progression, especially in this game versus the Chargers. I'm going to be taking Denver here, -3, and it's a 2-unit play for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had written down top lean. Denver was one of them, and we discussed this with the Atlanta game before. It's the same environment. You're getting a really strong line for a team that theoretically is far worse. And, we talk about this with all sports and all access points. Let the line tell you a story. This is absolutely a Denver story. We got 2 real bloated lines coming back in the next couple of games here. Philadelphia is laying a whopping 15.5 points to the New York Giants. Philadelphia does have some implications here, trying to lock up the top seed and the division in the NFC. I think Jalen Hurts probably is playing today. I don't think people knew he was that injured. I thought people maybe thought he was just kind of load managing, actually going back a couple weeks, but maybe not. Maybe he is more injured than people thought. However, now that it comes down to week 18 and this team does need to win to secure positioning in the playoffs and win the division, Philadelphia is coming back here, and the line's telling you the story. -15.5 is a large line in the division. Guns, pick some comments here, and we'll jump off it.
I mean, the line's telling you something here, folks. Giants really have nothing to play for. They made the playoffs. That's it. They're in, right? So I think the Eagles want that first round bye, and they're playing for to clinch that number 1 seed, and they're going to play it today. So I think this is going to be one of those spots where you're going to have a full-blown force of the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off a loss to the Saints last week at home, and they're playing a divisional opponent here in the Giants that, quite frankly, I'm not sure if the starters are even going to play in this game. I'm not sure if Danny Dimes is going to play in this game. I'm not sure if Saquon Barkley even wants to play in this game. I think this is more of just like, the Eagles are just going to clinch that first round bye. However, who knows? I tell you, week 18 is a weird thing. And sometimes, especially in the NFC East, those teams just really hate each other. So you may have a Dabo who's going to just be mad and play his starters way longer than they probably should, just because he doesn't want the Eagles to have that first round bye. So who knows? Line is telling you that it's probably an Eagles steamroll, but it's nothing I'm going to step in front of. I do know that the Giants are a very public dog today, however. So take that, note it. It's just not a game I want to step in. The line is way too big for me, but I think the Eagles will probably steamroll this team.
Yeah, I do believe, I don't have the exact information right in front of me, but I do believe historically in the NFL, lines over 2 touchdowns do suggest laying the points. It's the line strength, and it does become a bit of a confusion point for the average bettor because, again, Guns, the average bettor is looking at records as their first capping point. And what they see is a playoff team above 500 getting 15.5 points. And they think to themselves, wow, Somehow the books miss this. The books are giving us this money. Trust me, guys, and I say it every week, and I'll say this for the duration of my entire life on this planet and universe. Books are not giving you free money. Books are telling you an expected average in the game. The line is an average. So when they're telling you that Philadelphia should beat them by 15.5 points, they're telling you this is a historical divisional blowout potential here. As Guns mentioned, Dable could do some weird stuff. We don't really know. And I think the motivation to close the game is potentially sketchy. I think you're gambling in a lot of degrees here, but I just wanted to make that comment about how to evaluate the line as an expected game average, not something where books are missing it and you're getting some sort of access or value on the underdog here. And staying course with that, San Francisco 49ers are laying a very similar figure to the Arizona Cardinals, minus 14.5. Brock Purdy here against, I believe, Trace McSorley still playing. I'm not sure if Colt McCoy is in there. I honestly didn't go into immense detail here. But again, same dynamic here. Even more funky for this particular perspective. San Francisco did hammer the Cardinals going back earlier this year on the road, 38-10. You get a revenge game. I don't think it really matters here. I actually like San Francisco more here than I do Philly because I think this game lacks motivation. And I think if they're still laying this out, they're telling you one story. And that story is that the Cardinals are one of the most disrupted franchises in all of football. I think the Kyler Murray experiment has gone drastically awry. I think Cliff Kingsbury was a spot hire for Kyler Murray only. I mean, this guy was a pedestrian Big 12 coach. All of a sudden he gets plugged into the NFL. I think he's over his head. I think he's a good dude. I'd hang out with him and have some beers. And I know that some beautiful ladies hanging out as well, but I don't think he's a good NFL coach. Guns Picks, give me some comments on this one and we'll jump off.
This might be Cliff Kingsbury's last game as a Cardinals coach, too. I can see him getting fired at the end of the season. The experiment didn't work at all. And I'm not sure why he was even placed as a hire as a head coach. I mean, he didn't do anything in college at Texas Tech except for put up a ton of points in the Big 12. But I think this is a 49er spot as well. I wouldn't mind taking them on the first half here. I think they go out there and try to stomp a mud hole in them early and kill their will. They're playing for, there's a lot of things that got to happen. They need the Eagles to lose, but they're also playing for the number 1 seed as well here. They're trying to get that first round bye. They're going to be playing this game up. Both the Eagles and the 49ers are playing at the same time. So it's not like, oh, the Eagles already won this game, we have nothing to play for now type of situation. There, I mean, the line's telling you that in both of these spots that these teams are going to play up like it's a playoff game themselves because they're playing for that 1 week of rest that is well needed, especially if you've got guys that are banged up here. So I think if there's any take on this one, you got to be taking the 49ers if you're going to be playing this game. And I wouldn't mind taking them on the first half here. That might be an official for me. We'll see how that goes. I might post this later.
Yeah, I agree. Early, probably better than late. And Sammy Calmer in the house, what's up, brother? Making a good point. JJ Watt's final game. There is definitely some sentimentality there. I'm not sure how much the offense is going to get up necessarily for that. I think the defense, if anything, will rally. I just don't know how much you can apply that narrative to a one-off Week 18 garbage game. But I do agree that does have some significance within the locker room there. Next game on the 4 o'clock slate, Dallas at Washington. Dallas early season did beat Washington and cover 25-10. We have detailed this numerous times. That was really just yet again a Carson Wentz special. And what do I mean by that? Interceptions in inopportune times. That particular game, Washington did outgain them, have more time of possession and more first downs, and still managed to lose the game by more than 2 touchdowns. And that's been a snapshot to Carson Wentz football ever since he came back from that injury. You're getting a strong line here. Dallas on the road at -7. They were much shorter at home. It's telling you a Dallas story. Dallas does have motivation in the game, obviously, to potentially win the NFC East and obviously move up in the NFC playoff picture. Seeding-wise, I don't really have a whole lot in this game. I'll throw it to the gun for a couple of comments.
To me, I don't know if it's an owner decision or if it's a coach decision to start Carson Wentz, but for some reason, it's not like that. It's like they'd never even read a box score when Carson Wentz is behind the center for the Commanders here. I would never put a single nickel on a Carson Wentz quarterbacked team here. And the line is telling a story. It's telling, oh, Carson Wentz is the starter. We got to be taking the Cowboys here. I think, yeah, the only spot to take on this one is the Cowboys. It's kind of, for me, I just don't think there's any motivation on each side, but it is a divisional game. And I would rather trust the Cowboys here. And this is one of those spots, like they're not playing for a first round bye or anything like that. They probably want to get some momentum going into the playoffs here. And I think this is the line's telling you this is a Cowboy spot. So it's Cowboys or pass for me. That would be my lean.
Yeah, it's just a tough game. Because, I mean, even when you look at Dallas on the road within the division, there's just a lot of moving parts. Go back early season in a primetime game at the New York Giants. Cooper Rush was the quarterback. And obviously, Cooper Rush ran off a very, very effective ATS sample when he was in there for a period of time. You can't really cross-reference that with this game. And obviously, they did not play particularly well in Philadelphia earlier this year. Philadelphia is not Washington. Hard to cross-reference that. Dallas has been explosive on the road, scoring points. Washington has a great defense. There's just not a lot going on here today. And Akbar says, third-string quarterback starting for Washington. We should bring Akbar on the show. We have our information specialist here. We apologize for the misinformation, guys. We didn't look into this game with immense detail. And, of course, that's also probably why the game is at -7. But staying course, more importantly, the 8 o'clock game hopefully has some implications here. It does have implications for Green Bay regardless. Green Bay hosting Detroit, NFC North rivalry, and maybe surprisingly a revenge game. We've detailed this week after week. The Detroit Lions figured out how to win professional football games in the middle of the year, and it really, really hit home when they did beat Aaron Rodgers at home 15-9. You get a revenge game for Green Bay. You get peak motivation. As we mentioned, this is slightly dependent on what Seattle does earlier against the Rams. However, 8:20 p.m. tonight, this is going to be a great game to watch. Guns picks. I don't believe you have an official, but I think there are definitely some angles to discuss in this game.
Yeah, like I said before, I think this is all going to matter. This game will matter if Seattle loses their game earlier in the 4 p.m. slate. So the way this is looking right now for me, if you want to take the game right now, I'd say you take the Packers now. Or if you like the lines, you take them now because the line's going to really fluctuate. So you may get the worst of the line depending on what side you take on this one. But like Shark said, this is a revenge game. You have the Packers losing the first matchup in Detroit. Real low scoring game, if I remember correctly. It was like a 21-16 type of game. Packers are just playing really well right now. And it's not just their offense. I think their defense has really progressed dramatically, especially in the secondary. They're really playing tough on the receivers. I think this is going to be a different type of outcome in this one. And, it's Aaron Rodgers. It's prime time. It's the Packers. The Lions playing a tremendous year. I think they have the right coach in this situation to moving forward with the franchise. But I kind of have this feeling that the way the Packers have been playing right now is probably more of a Packers type of game here, especially with the revenge spot checked, and their defense just playing really motivated right now. So if I had to lean on this one, it'd be the Packers, but nothing official right now. I want to see what happens in the Seahawks game.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. The Packers here have turned a corner noticeably. And to the surprise of me, I was definitely one midseason saying I thought that they were just completely disrupted and Rodgers had checked out emotionally, but he has not. And this is definitely a really fascinating element to the NFC playoff picture, not only with Rodgers having the potential to get in and really backdoor the season, but also Tom Brady really catching some wind, if you can call it that, to win the NFC South. This is what the NFL wants. The NFL wants Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. As much as we can sit here and bet the Lions every week and cash tickets, the NFL is trying to sell a product entertainment-wise, and they definitely want Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. And Guns makes a great comment about Dan Campbell with the Lions. I just want to say this. Watching Hard Knocks in the preseason, this guy has immense energy and personal passion for the human race. And I will say that I respect the hell out of this guy. I think he's a great human being. Seeing the way he cared for every player, even the guys he had to cut, was really inspirational. I think he really could. You can take a lot of advice on how to act as a person watching Dan Campbell. And it makes me it makes my soul happy to see them succeed because I like seeing good people succeed. And I think Dan Campbell's a good person. So I was thinking in the preseason, this team's not going to win games. He's a big teddy bear. He's an amazing guy, but they're not going to win. Now that they're winning, this is just an amazing, amazing professional football and human story. I'm rooting for the Lions. I got to be honest here. And I think there is a bit of a counter narrative within the game. Both of these teams have played very well in this particular schedule spot. The Lions are actually 2-0 ATS on the road within the division. They did cover at Minnesota, and they did win outright and cover at Chicago. The other side, however, does find Green Bay. Green Bay is also 2-0 ATS at home in the division. Early season blowout against the Bears, I believe, in week 2, 27-10 in prime time. And then obviously last week, an absolute hammer Guns pick special against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. This is a similar environment to the Vikings game. It's a revenge game within the season. The line is short, but the line did not matter last week. I do think Green Bay gets there tonight, as much as I might not like it in terms of my emotional backing out of nowhere for the Lions, but I'm behind the Lions. I like the Lions. So it is what it is. And I just want to go back through a couple of the games as we obviously got disrupted in the broadcast, and we do have a few extra minutes here. Guys in the chat saying the Rams are a sharp look. Drabaka, our guy, Sammy Calmer, Detroit Gator, what's going on, brother? And ultimately, we do think the Rams are the sharp side in the game. The first point that I wanted to make, and I said it before, but we'll rehash it for a second. When you look at lines within the division, when the Seattle Seahawks lay 7.5 points on the road and they come home and lay less at home than they did on the road, that's telling you a Rams numerical story. And again, the Baker Mayfield element to the game takes on a lot of inspiration out of nowhere. But I do think Seattle is very similar to some of these other teams that really caught ATS heat early season, Minnesota and Atlanta, to name two within the NFC. You saw what happened to Atlanta. They created really hard. And you see what's happening with Minnesota. Minnesota having run such a clean sheet, getting blown out twice in the last month against Dallas and Green Bay. I will say this, Guns, going forward, and we will have NFL playoff shows. Minnesota has been flirting with it all year. I think Minnesota might get blown out in the playoffs real quick. And and just going back to the previous, the other game that I wanted to briefly discuss, the Miami game against the Jets, I do think there is spoiler element to the Jets on the road. And I think the fact that Flacco's coming back in here does channel you back to early season where they were 4-0 ATS on the road to start the campaign. Joe Flacco being in there for most of the games. And again, Skylar Thompson coming in here. Miami is disrupted. You know, the media was so quick to praise Mike McDaniel mid-season as being a genius, you know, being a great personality manager. All of a sudden, they get a couple injuries. They're not managing it very well, and they're falling off the grid completely. It just goes to show you how things can flip so quickly in the NFL. It's unbelievable as a sport. 17 games, 18 weeks, 60 minutes of fast-paced chaos, gladiator stuff. And I want to just bring that back to the center. This has been an unbelievable campaign for us in the regular season. We appreciate you guys beyond words for interacting with us. We know when you watch the NFL, not only do you have mainstream media, you have about 100,000 different shows to watch. It is the Shark and the Gun. It is the odds fellow when he decides to come on the broadcast every other week. He's a load managing specialist. Next year, we'll have the three-way every single week, I believe. And we're going to wrap with the officials. My only official play this week, Pittsburgh -2.5, 1 unit. As I said before, playoff motivation, divisional revenge game, and a line angle. And this is a really, really brutal spot for Deshaun Watson and the boys going on the road in the division. Guns Picks has 4 officials. I align with them. Again, I'm not going nuts financially on this Sunday. Atlanta -4, very strong number, theoretically. Good number to buy. And Denver -3. And New Orleans -3.5, and New England +8. The Gun is firing as he always does on a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday. It is January 8th, 2023. It is Sharky Waters Nation. 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. We appreciate you guys immensely. NBA will drop this afternoon. We're in the beginning of a beautiful, beautiful campaign this 2023 season. Guns Picks, a pleasure as always. We'll be back next week for Wild Card Football. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
I just want to answer Detroit Gator before I get to that. He said, what kind of bourbon am I going to be drinking? I might have to bring out the Woodford today. Got to get the reserve going, maybe have a little sip, reminisce on the season. A great season for all of us here on the Circa Million Show. And I saw we had over 100 people watching us live and 67 on Twitter. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you comment. I appreciate all you guys in the chat. I appreciate everybody that has watched us all season long. Hopefully we helped you cash some tickets this year. We'll be back for some playoff talk, believe it or not. And later today, I'm going to give you my official college football championship pick on video. So please look out for that one. It is going to be a big one, maybe the biggest one of the year. So till next time for the playoffs, we say goodbye. Let's cash some tickets. And as always, let's keep dancing.